There is something nobody tells you about having an extremely high IQ. They tell you it is an advantage. They tell you it means success, and fast thinking, and a better life. And in some ways, they are right. But in other ways that researchers have spent decades quietly documenting, a very high IQ is one of the strangest and most isolating experiences a human being can have. And here is what makes it fascinating. The very things that make these people exceptional are also the things that make their lives hardest. Their brain never stops running. They feel things more intensely than anyone expects. They can see what other people cannot see, and they cannot turn that off. Not at parties, not at 3 a.m., not in the middle of conversations that are supposed to be simple. Today, we are going to go inside it. 10 psychological patterns that show up in people with extremely high IQs, all of them backed by research, and all of them far more complicated than you might expect. Let us begin. They cannot just answer the question. Here is something that will sound strange at first. Ask someone with a very high IQ a simple question. Something like, which job offer should I take? Or what do you think about this decision? And watch what happens. They will pause. Sometimes for a long time. Then they will give you a longer answer than you asked for. And then they might ask a question about your question. Most people read this as arrogance, or overthinking, or an inability to be direct. Here is what is actually happening. The high IQ brain does not process a question by finding the most direct route to an answer. It automatically maps the surrounding system first. The causes behind the cause. The exceptions to the rule. The downstream effects of each possible answer. The thing the question is not asking that actually matters more. Psychologist Keith Stanovich called this dysrationalia, the gap between raw cognitive power and the ability to function in the way most social situations demand. The smartest people in the room are often the last to give a simple answer, not because they don't know it, but because they know how many things the simple answer gets wrong. Think of it like a chess player who automatically computes 10 moves ahead when the other person is thinking about one. That is an extraordinary advantage when you need it. The problem is, the brain does not know when to stop. It runs the 10-move calculation on everything, including ordering off a menu, including texting someone back, including every conversation that is supposed to be simple. The engine that makes them brilliant has no off switch, and that changes everything about how they move through the world. You will also notice high IQ people self-correct mid-sentence more than almost anyone else. They say, well, it depends more. They hedge. They add qualifications that most people find exhausting. But those qualifications are not fussiness. They are accuracy. And for these people, saying something less than fully accurate feels genuinely wrong, the same way it would feel to you to write down a number you knew was incorrect. The loneliness nobody warned them about. Imagine being at a party, surrounded by people having a great time, and feeling completely, inexplicably alone. Not sad, not angry, just elsewhere. Like everyone around you is speaking a language you technically know, but that was not made for how your mind works. This is one of the most consistent findings in research on high IQ individuals. Not that they dislike people. Most of them find people fascinating. But there is a persistent, low-grade friction that comes from a mind that moves differently from the people around it. Their humor runs 3 layers deep. Their questions go further and faster than most people are comfortable with, and they translate themselves constantly softening the pace, filing the edges off their thinking, so it fits into the conversational space available. Over time, that translation produces a specific kind of fatigue, not physical tiredness, the particular weariness of never quite being understood without effort. And here is what makes it worse for a long time. Most of them think the problem is them. Psychologist Satoshi Kanazawa found something counterintuitive. People with very high IQs actually report lower life satisfaction the more social interaction they have. This is the opposite of almost everyone else. For most people, more social time means more happiness. For high IQ individuals, it often means the opposite. Not because they are antisocial, because most social environments are calibrated for a different kind of brain. Here is what they actually describe. When you ask them honestly, years, sometimes decades of believing something was wrong with them, that everyone else had been handed a social instruction manual they somehow never received, that the ease other people had in groups, in small talk, in casual connection, was normal. And their difficulty with it was a defect. What most of them eventually discover is that the defect was never theirs. The environment was simply not built for the mind they had. And when they do find the person, or the handful of people where the translation is not required, where the conversation can go at full speed and full depth without apology. Those relationships become structurally necessary, not a luxury, a lifeline. The brain that does not know how to stop. Let me ask you something. How long does it take you to pick something off a menu? Most people, a few seconds. They see something that looks good. They order it. They move on. For many people with extremely high IQs, choosing off a menu can feel genuinely difficult. And not because they are indecisive. Because the default mode network in their brain, the system that generates background mental activity, is significantly more active than in the average person. Scientists discovered this studying brain scans. They expected high IQ individuals to show more activity during complex tasks. What they did not expect was what happened during rest. The high IQ brain does not actually rest. It keeps generating. At 3 a.m., in the shower, in the middle of a conversation that is supposed to be about something completely different. The brain keeps producing, keeps testing, keeps finding the exception to the rule you just made peace with 5 minutes ago. Psychologist Gerald Matthews found that highly intelligent people are significantly more likely to ruminate, to replay past events, conversations, and decisions long after they have passed. They are not wallowing. They are still running the analysis, looking for the variable they missed, the thing they said that landed wrong, the decision that felt right but might not have been. This shows up in small ways that most people around them would never guess. A high IQ person composing a simple text message might write and delete 4 drafts before sending, not because they are anxious, because they can see, in real time, exactly how each version could be misread. Here is the important thing. The thing that changes everything about how you understand this pattern. The engine that generates this constant mental activity is the same engine that produces their best work. You cannot have one without the other. The brain that runs 15 scenarios before making a small decision is the same brain that catches the fatal flaw in the plan everyone else already approved. The same brain that solves problems in its sleep. You don't get to keep the gift and return the rest. The only place most high IQ people describe genuine mental quiet is in complete absorption. Not relaxation, not distraction. A problem big enough that the brain is fully occupied and has no processing power left to generate background noise. This is why so many of them become obsessive about their work. It is not ambition. It is relief. They felt the weight of the world before they had words for it. Here is something that comes up again and again when you talk to people with very high IQs about their childhoods. They notice things early. Not just academically, that part people expect. They notice the big things. Death, time, the fact that everything ends, the question of what any of it means. And they noticed it years before most children even know those questions exist. Certainly. A 5-year-old asking their parent why anything exists. An 8-year-old who cannot sleep because they have quietly worked out that the people they love will someday be gone. A 12-year-old who has been sitting alone with questions about consciousness and mortality for months and never said a word because there was no one to say it to. These are not rare stories. Among gifted individuals, they are almost universal. And here is what makes it complicated: the emotional scaffolding most people develop to handle these questions, the religious frameworks, the philosophical education, the conversations with other people who have been there. That scaffolding usually comes much later. The high IQ child often encounters the questions years before they have any tools to manage them. Psychologist Paul Bloom studied what he calls the tendency toward deep thinking, the compulsion in highly intelligent people to pursue questions that have no satisfying resolution. Not as a project, as something the brain does automatically, the way other minds might drift to what is for dinner. What is surprising is what this eventually produces. People who have been sitting with the big questions since childhood tend to develop a relationship with uncertainty that most adults never find. They are less easily shaken. They already knew life was complicated. They have been practicing, and the individuals who navigate it best are the ones who eventually stop trying to silence the questions and start building things with them instead. A field of work, a creative practice, a mission. The unresolvable becomes the engine. The smarter they are, the more they doubt themselves. This is the one that surprises people the most. You would think that a very high IQ would produce confidence, more knowledge, more certainty, more assurance. That is what common sense says. Common sense is wrong. Research shows that highly intelligent people consistently underestimate their own abilities, not out of false modesty, not as a strategy, because the more you know, the more precisely you can see the edges of what you know and the vastness of everything that lies beyond. The people who know less cannot see those edges as clearly, which makes them feel more confident, not more capable, more confident. This is the reverse. Dunning-Kruger. In the classic version, limited knowledge produces overconfidence. In the reverse, sometimes called the impostor effect, deep knowledge produces self-doubt, because you can see, with painful clarity, every gap, every limitation, every place where your understanding breaks down. A study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that high IQ individuals consistently rated their own performance lower than objective observers rated it. They remembered every hesitation, every error, every moment the answer was slow to come. They forgot the 20 times they were the only person in the room who found the answer at all. Think about what this does to a person over time. A musician who hears every subtle flaw in their own performance while the audience gives a standing ovation. A writer who cannot stop editing because they can hear the sentence they meant to write, the ideal version that lives just past what they actually produced. An engineer who signs off on a project and immediately begins mentally cataloging what they would do differently next time. The internal standard is calibrated to something most people cannot even see. And measuring yourself against an invisible bar that rises every time you approach it is a particular kind of exhausting. The thing that tends to help is not lowering the standard. That feels dishonest to people who have spent their lives pursuing precision. What tends to help is learning to separate the internal bar from the external evidence. To understand that not yet perfect does not mean not good enough. That the gap they see so clearly is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of how far they can see, all the way in, or not at all. When something genuinely captures the attention of a very high IQ person, something unusual happens. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying a state he called flow, complete absorption in a task, where time stops feeling like time. Self-consciousness disappears, and the work and the person doing it become temporarily indistinguishable. Athletes know this state. Musicians know it. Surgeons know it. For highly intelligent people, it happens more easily, but only under one condition. The task has to be genuinely demanding. It has to require something close to everything they have, because here is the other side. When something does not genuinely engage them, when the task is routine, repetitive, or below the threshold the brain considers interesting, they often cannot force themselves through it. And this looks, from the outside, like laziness, or avoidance, or a character flaw. It is none of those things. Researchers at the University of New Mexico found a notable correlation between high IQ and ADHD diagnosis. Rates not because intelligence causes ADHD, but because the high IQ brain has such a high stimulation threshold that routine environments can feel like genuine deprivation. The brain that sustains itself for 12 hours on something complex simply cannot allocate its resources to something that does not meet the minimum threshold for engagement. It is not refusing, it is starving. This is why so many of the world's most cognitively powerful people build careers rather than take them. They are not following a conventional path. They are constructing the environment that can finally sustain a brain like theirs, because the existing environments could not. Many also discover that teaching is one of the most reliable routes to sustained engagement. Taking something they understand deeply and finding the clearest possible way to transfer it to another mind, it activates the intellectual and the relational simultaneously. And for a brain that is always running, finding something that uses all of it is rare and valuable. They feel everything more than you think. If you believed everything movies told you about highly intelligent people, you would think they are cold, logical, controlled, all brain, no feeling. Here is what the data actually shows. Psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski spent his career studying what he called overexcitabilities, 5 categories of heightened sensitivity that appear disproportionately in gifted individuals. Not occasionally, consistently. Emotional overexcitability was among the strongest. Highly intelligent people do not feel less than other people. They often feel significantly more moved by beauty, more disturbed by injustice, not as an abstract category, but as a visceral, physical experience when they encounter it. More affected by tragedy, by cruelty, by the gap between how things are and how things could be. And this surprises people who thought intelligence would insulate someone from feeling. It does the opposite. The same mechanism that allows them to see systemic patterns more clearly also allows them to feel the human cost of those patterns more sharply. This creates a particular kind of exhaustion that is hard to explain to people who do not experience it. They feel the weight of things' global problems, other people's pain, the distance between how things are and how things should be with unusual force, and they cannot easily choose not to. The coping strategies that tend to work are ones that honor this depth rather than suppress it. Nature. Deep creative work. Physical movement. Conversation with the rare person who can meet them there. These are not indulgences. They are how a nervous system this sensitive stays functional. Many describe writing as the primary tool for managing their emotional world. Not because they cannot express themselves verbally, they often can. Brilliantly. But the written form gives them the precision and the control to process what they experience at the actual depth it occurs. Surface feels like starvation to them. Watch a high IQ person at a large social event. Notice where they go. They will not stay long in the big group. They will drift toward the edges. Find the one person in the corner who is saying something that actually goes somewhere. Have one long, real conversation instead of 12 short surface ones. And often leave early. This is not arrogance. It is not rudeness. It is hunger. Highly intelligent people have what I would call a depth requirement. Conversation that stays on the surface weather. Small observations. Social pleasantries does not just bore them. It actively drains them. In the same way, a meal with no nutritional content leaves a person hungry despite having eaten. The calories were there. The nourishment was not. Psychologist Arthur Aaron's research on interpersonal connection found that fast intimacy, moving quickly past surface topics into genuine, substantive conversation, was significantly more attractive to people with higher cognitive ability. They are not interested in spending 20 minutes establishing that the traffic was bad. They want to know what you actually think about something that matters to you. Their interests reflect this same depth requirement. High IQ individuals tend toward interests that run deep and narrow rather than broad and shallow. Not trends, not what is popular. A specific, absorbing rabbit hole they descended into completely and have not left. They will spend 6 hours going deeper into something that already consumes most of their attention. The depth itself is the point. The social challenge this creates is real and persistent. Most social bonding happens at the surface first. The small talk is not meaningless. It is how people establish safety before going deeper. High IQ individuals tend to compress or skip this stage instinctively, which can read as cold or intense or socially unaware. The people who stay long enough to find what lives below the surface describe them as among the most interesting people they have ever known. Failure hits them different. Here is a question. When something goes wrong, when you fail at something you genuinely tried to do, how you experience it. For most people, failure is emotional first. The feelings come before the analysis. For people with very high IQs, something different tends to happen. The analysis comes almost simultaneously with the feeling, and sometimes not always, but sometimes it comes before. Because the brain is already running the postmortem before the moment is even fully over. Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset found that the individuals who recovered fastest from failure were not those who felt the least. They were the people who could most accurately understand what had happened and why. High cognitive ability accelerates precisely that the capacity to reconstruct what occurred, isolate the variables, and produce a more accurate model for next time. But here is where it gets complicated. For many high IQ people, their intelligence is the thing they were identified for earliest, the thing they were praised for as children, the identity that formed around being the one who figured things out. And when the person whose identity is built around intelligence fails, really fails, visibly, inescapably, it does not just feel like a setback. It feels like a contradiction of the self. The brain that can analyze failure most accurately is also the brain that can feel it most specifically. They are not vague about what went wrong. They know exactly, and they know why, and they know what it means. That level of precision is both what makes them exceptional and what makes certain failures land with unusual weight. What distinguishes those who navigate it well is a separation they learn over time between "I failed at this" and "I am a failure." That separation is not automatic. It is not given. For many high IQ people, learning it in their body, not just in their head, is some of the most important work they do. The quietest person in the room is often running the deepest calculation. We have a very specific image of what a highly intelligent person looks like in a room. Verbal, fast, confident, dominant. The reality is more interesting than that. A significant portion of the most cognitively powerful people you will ever meet are also among the quietest in the room. Not because they are shy, not because they lack confidence, but because they have learned, usually the hard way, that speaking before you fully understand the situation is costly. They know how many qualifications the honest answer actually requires. They know that something 90% accurate and something 100% accurate can send a conversation in completely different directions. They would rather say nothing than say something that is close, but wrong. In most social and professional settings, this is invisible. The meeting proceeds without their input. Decisions get made based on louder, faster, less precise contributions. And then, sometimes much later, someone notices that the thing the quiet person mentioned briefly 6 months ago, the concern they raised once and did not push, turned out to be exactly right. And when they do speak, something changes. Not because they performed, because they waited until they had something exact. Other people can feel the difference even when they cannot name it, between someone filling silence and someone breaking it with something true. Many also strongly prefer written to verbal communication, not avoidance. Optimization. Writing gives the brain the time and space to run at full capacity without the friction of real-time performance. The message they send has been through a level of editing that the spoken version never gets. It is the more complete, more accurate version of what they actually think. Research on this is consistent quiet. High IQ individuals are systematically underestimated in group settings, in interviews, in first impressions. The bias toward verbal confidence is strong and it is everywhere. And then, over time, as their work speaks, as their analysis proves accurate, as the prediction they made quietly 6 months ago turns out to have been right, the room recalibrates. Sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. And when it does, it tends to be permanent. If you have been watching this and recognizing yourself in it, the thinking that never stops, the loneliness of a mind running at a different speed, the emotional depth that surprises people who expected something cooler, the hunger for conversations that actually go somewhere, I want to say something directly. You are not the problem. You have never been the problem. The difficulty has never been your intelligence. It has been the friction between a mind built the way yours is built and a world full of environments that were designed for a different kind of mind. Schools that rewarded speed over depth. Workplaces that rewarded confidence over accuracy. Social scripts that rewarded surface over substance. The goal is not to become someone easier to understand. The goal is to find and sometimes build the environments that can actually hold what you are. The problem big enough to need everything you have. The person or two who want the conversation at full depth and full speed. The work that does not ask you to be smaller in order to fit. Find your people. Find your problem. Find the work that demands everything you have and then finds there is more. Because the world does not need another version of someone who made themselves smaller to fit. It needs what you actually are. If this video described you or someone you love, share it with them. Sometimes the most important thing is finding out you are not the only one. And if you want to go deeper into the psychology behind why you think, feel, and behave the way you do, that is exactly what this channel is built for. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.